22 Network and Neapolis Media proudly present to you the Lone Gunman Podcast with your host, Rob Clark, where research comes to shine and myths help to guide. Stay tuned, be right there.
Call your next witness.
The government calls Mrs. Ruth Paine.
If you would, please, if you'd come forward, come through those doors, come up here and take the witness stand. If you would, please.
Now, I'd like to, you don't mind if I ask you some personal questions about your interest in Russia, do you?
No.
You, of course, are not an agent for the CIA, are you?
No.
No, you see, you laugh.
Yes, I do.
You are not an agent for the KGB, are you?
No.
Are you laughing again?
Well, you ridiculed me for laughing.
No,
once,
I
so
don't mean
won't
to
do it
ridicule
again.
you for it. I just want to know if you find the inquiry amusing.
What's up, everybody? This is your boy Rob Clark. This is episode 90 of the Lone Gunman Podcast, Paines in the Arse. I have a very special guest returning to the show today, Miss Francesca Akhtar, Cold War historian and author, and we are going to be talking about Ruth and Michael Paine today. But real quick before we get into it, I wanted to mention the passing of a great researcher, Mr. Dave McGowan, who succumbed to an aggressive form of cancer on November 22nd of this year. And for those of you not familiar with Dave McGowan and his research, he's contributed a lot to the moon hoax. Wrote a book called Scenes from Inside the Canyon about the music scene in the Laurel Canyon and all the crazy stuff going on there with the Manson family and drugs and just a great guy. His interviews are out there on the web. He's got a great website called Dave's Web that you should check out. So I just wanted to mention that because I love listening to the guy. I like the way he thinks, or I like the way he thought, and he will be missed. So, without further ado, I bring to you Miss Francesca Akhtar.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Lone Gunman Podcast. This is your host, Rob Clark, and with me today, and hopefully we get it done today, is Cold War historian Francesca Akhtar joining me from Italy. How you doing, Francesca?
Hi, Rob. It's good to be back. Yeah, I'm fine, thank you.
Good. I apologize for the last time that we spoke and things didn't work out, but we are going to get it done today. It's been requested by several people that we touch on the Paines, Ruth and Michael, and the possible roles that they could have had in either babysitting or guiding, things or making things happen a certain way. And you wrote a really good article, I think, that kind of highlighted a little bit of the Paines and Michael in particular, called The 3 Men in a Book Depository. So maybe we could start there with what Michael was up to there.
Sure. Yeah, it was an article that I wrote a few years ago for the Dealey Plaza UK Journal, which is the Dealey Plaza Echo. I've always been interested in Paines, particularly Michael Paine, because I think, although Ruth is very interesting, and I'm sure we'll get to her later, I think that not so much attention has been given to Michael Paine.
Right.
But I think he does deserve some scrutiny because he also has some very interesting links to intelligence organisations. And also the reason I wrote the article is that I was going through some FBI documents. Purely by chance, I stumbled across a couple that were telling this story of Michael Paine that was reported by two students who said that they had met this man at a cafe at the university. And these two people were students at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, and they reported that they had met this guy who used to eat lunch quite often on Sunday mornings at the cafeteria, which was located directly across from the campus. And it's really, really strange because when you get to reading it, he apparently would strike up conversations with these students about Cuba and talk about the way that the US was involved in trying to get rid of Fidel Castro and the attitude towards Castro, and basically saying that he was sympathetic towards Cuba. And what they also reported is that he one day struck up a conversation with them and said that he knew a man who was a former Marine that had been in Russia and that he moved to Dallas and that his name was Oswald. What's really interesting is what they said next, because they claimed that he said that he'd met Oswald through another person in Fort Worth, but that he knew that Oswald was going to be taking a job in a book depository in Dallas, where he had also been working, so where Paine had been working. And they said that the guy also said that he was a designer at Bell Helicopter Plant, which was located between Dallas and Fort Worth. And again, he had been also employed in a book depository. And this is very interesting because they said that this conversation took place in April, I think it's April or May 1963. Now, if that's true, it kind of begs the question as to how Michael Paine could have known about Oswald taking a job in the book depository in April when he actually didn't apply for the job until October.
Yeah, that's way early in the timeline there. I mean, they hadn't even moved their operation to Elm Street yet. I think it was in the works, and they were, upgrading the building to accommodate. But yeah, this is in the timeline of things. This is way before any of that was even thought about.
So that caught my attention. I thought this is strange. So I kept reading, and they didn't actually. I don't think they originally came up with his name. But what happened is the FBI went to interview. Well, one of them, a guy called Ed Buck, who was a law student, and he didn't know. He said he didn't know this guy's name, but he gave a very good description of this man. Said that he was about 35 years old, very slim, and about 6 feet tall, with black hair, blue eyes, and a long face. And so they actually, he was re-interviewed 2 weeks later, and they actually showed him a picture of Michael Paine, who positively identified him. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Also, there was another student with Ed Buck who also said the same thing. But it's very odd because it was almost as if they didn't really investigate this incident properly.
Yeah, I could see why they wouldn't want to.
Well, exactly. This is the conclusion I came to, because when it came to the other student, they sort of said, well, they only had her term time address, which was at the university, but by the time they got around to interview her, it was the summer and she'd already left. But apparently they did have her home address, which was her parents' house, and it presumably, as I state in the article, that they made no attempt to contact her there, or if they did, why didn't they mention it? I think mentioned in the report. So
yeah,
it's another example in the case of the FBI particularly not really doing a proper, very thorough investigation, and it begs the question: is there another?
Yeah, and you know what it sounds like to me? It sounds a lot like a Bannister operation. I doubt that he was running Michael Paine, but it sounds like something that he was doing in New Orleans. as far as trying to out these communists on local college campuses, and like Oswald was handing his leaflets out, and things like this. And a lot of people over the years have said that this is what Bannister was doing in New Orleans.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think it's either the James D'Eugenio book, his updated version, or like the Peter Dale Scott, one of the two, that mentions, and I think the original source for this was a Dallas policeman that said that when they searched the Paine house on Friday, on sort of the afternoon of the assassination, that they found filing cabinets with names and addresses of communist sympathisers. So that is true. That does seem to suggest that they were not necessarily involved with the assassination, because there is no evidence for that, but that they might have had a role, an intelligence role, to do with, like you said, outing communist sympathisers.
Yeah, no, this is not, Ruth Paine, her first dalliance with, I guess being in touch with like Russian culture. I mean, I believe she was teaching a class on Russian at like a local school.
That's right.
And yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's really odd that, her whole premise for inviting Marina to come live with her was so, she could learn Russian. And
that's exactly it. Why would she need to learn Russian if she was already good enough that she was teaching a high school class of Russian? A story just doesn't add up.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And then I found out a couple weeks ago that she was actually paying Marina $10 a week. She was providing her with food, medical care, and paying pretty much for everything for her, for her and her kids, and paying her $10 a week. So it wasn't like Oswald had to really worry about her per se, and it was kind of an enticing offer, I think, for somebody in Marina's position where Oswald really wasn't home that much.
Yes, absolutely. And I think really what's always struck me about the Paines, and I think to anybody who has either studied the assassination case or who knows a little bit about how intelligence agencies work and how people were recruited, especially during that period, to spy on or to monitor people who had suspected communist sympathies, you would kind of accept her story at face value if you didn't know any better, because it does seem to, if you read the official version, it does seem to fit that she was just a housewife. I think the picture that's always put forward of her in the official story, she was just an innocent housewife caught up in history, caught up in events, and I don't believe that for a minute, because I think when you study it, you realise there's something else going on there with her. And actually, what I wanted to draw your attention to was, I think we discussed this before, that Ruth Paine actually appeared on this filmed mock trial that was filmed in the UK. Actually, it was filmed in London. I have no idea why that is. I don't know if that was some sort of a legal issue, but they flew over quite a few people, including many of Oswald's co-workers, including Harold Norman and Will Fraser. I don't know, have you seen that?
I have. Actually, I played a clip of the Harold Norman one, just a little, like one, I condensed it down to like a 1 minute clip. I played it before the second part of Richard Gilbride's interview, right at the very beginning, and just to illustrate, that something was very, very odd with these depository workers that day. But yeah, I've seen a good bit of it, not all of it, but all the juicy parts. I've seen Fraser and of course Ruth and Norman and stuff.
Yeah, well, I would suggest to anybody listening who hasn't seen it, I can send you the link afterwards. It's on YouTube now, and it's the way it's done is quite well, because it's divided into witnesses, so you can just go straight to the witness if you don't want to sit through the whole thing. But Ruth Paine appearance, or should I say performance, also performance, because I think she gives a good performance on there, is actually very interesting to watch, because when Jerry Spence, for those people that don't know, Jerry Spence play the part of the defender, so he was trying to defend Oswald. And it's very interesting because at one point, when he's questioning her after Beovu finished with her, he says to her, he actually asks her if she's an agent of the CIA. And even before he's finished speaking, she kind of laughs very uncomfortably and looks at the floor. And the body language is just very, very interesting. And she just is very, very uncomfortable. And then even when he says, he asks her about studying the Russian language and how that came about, she seems very, very flustered. And he actually chides her when he asks her whether she works, has she ever been an agent of the CIA, when he says, or the KGB. And she laughs. He actually chides her for laughing. He sort of says, well, you find this funny, why are you laughing? And she doesn't really know what to say. It's just very, very interesting to watch.
Yeah, well, I might put that clip at the beginning of I might put that clip at the beginning of this episode so people can at least hear it. But I would encourage everyone to go watch it because, like you said, it's very much a body language kind of a thing. But it is amusing to hear her the interaction.
And I've studied body language a little bit as an amateur because I find it very interesting. And they do say that 95% of the way we communicate with people is through body language. And it's very hard to fake, is the other thing. But there's also a very interesting performance by Bill Fraser, because part of that when he's asked about Oswald, not to go too much off the point, but I know we talked about Fraser before when I was on, and he states that Lee was the only employee missing, which we know today is blatantly not true.
Yeah, a lot of people like to parrot that and say that that he was the only employee missing, but that's been disputed by a lot of people and over the years, and people that we know weren't there, like Charles Gibbons wasn't there, various other workers weren't there, but people love to say that, and I think even I can't remember who it was. I was reading Larry Sneed's book and. It might have been Otis Williams who noticed that there was maybe only four people standing around truly when he did that. So, yeah, it's kind of a joke that people cling to that notion that Oswald was the only one missing. I don't know where that got started, but, it's one of those, it's part of the lore, I guess, that gets handed down from generation to generation and gets repeated so often people think it's true, but, it's not true at all.
And I would have thought if he weren't there, he must have known that that's not true. So why, 23 years later, it would have been, why was he still saying that? But I think we have discussed before, haven't we, about how part of the Fraser's story just don't add up.
Yeah, and excuse me, the more I've been talking to Richard Gilbride, none of these stories add up with these workers, really. I mean, you got Jack Doherty saying he was on the 5th floor and then the 6th floor and then he came down. But you got the 3 black guys on the 5th floor that didn't see him. They don't do anything. I think even Spence asked him in that mock trial. He asked Harold Norman. So you heard a gun. You heard somebody firing a gun above your head. He said, and you didn't run out of there. You didn't do anything. You didn't say, hey, there's a guy with a gun up here. You didn't do anything. And he was like, no, like it would have been foolish for him to say anything like, hey, there's a guy up here with a gun, or do something about it.
Exactly. And that's also the case. I've always found Bonnie Ray Williams' story quite strange because it can't be true. Either he's lying or he's mistaken. But if he says that he was on the 6th floor up until very recently, how is that possible? Because the shooters would have had to have time to get into position. So something's not right somewhere.
Yeah, that whole thing is
which is an understatement, but
yeah. And I was like I said, when I was talking to Richard Gilbride, he brought out a lot of stuff that that nobody really likes to think about because it does go into a little bit of speculation. But when you try to parse out what all these depository workers Between their first day testimony, their Warren Commission testimony, what they've told researchers over the years, what they told the HFCA, and none of it matches. There's a lot of contradictions, and there's a lot of problems with all of it. I mean, when you're talking about, the depository workers themselves, and exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, and I think Roy Truly is another interesting character that I read. I haven't been able to really confirm it to any degree, really, but I have read or I heard a rumour that Truly worked for intelligence during the Second World War. I'd love to know if that's true. I mean, I've really found a conclusive source on that, but...
Well, I know Shelley did. Shelley admitted it in an interview in the 70s that he was, working for the CIA or military intelligence after the war.
Right.
And Jack Doherty and Bill Shelley were both in the ROTC at Crozier Tech, which is like a technical high school over here. Before you go to college or enter the service, which they both did at the same time, and they both went. I don't know about Doherty, but something always shook me funny with him because they always said how he was like mildly retarded or slow or special or something to that effect. But people, the Army doesn't take people like that. Yet you have to be able to train them with a gun and trust them, and they just don't do that.
But yeah, talking about the book depository, just to go back a bit to Michael Paine and this story that he worked at the book depository, and you could say, okay, well, the students might have been mistaken. But actually, the FBI must have taken it seriously to a certain extent, because they did actually go to interview Roy Truly about this. And also the manager of another book depository in Dallas to ask if it's true that Michael Paine had ever been employed by either company. But it's very strange because, again, the way they went about trying to investigate this is just bizarre beyond extreme. Because they interviewed Roy Truly on the 9th of June 1964, and he said that he was the person that was responsible for hiring and firing all the warehouse personnel. But when you look at the report, it appears from Truly's questioning that Michael Paine didn't work at the book depository. But when you actually go through the record properly, it's a bit more complicated, because either the report was not written very well, and so they didn't actually mention it, or they didn't ask. It's one of the two, but basically it seems that the FBI only gave Truly a description of Paine. Didn't actually say, well, did Michael Paine, as in the name, give him the name and ask him to check the records, did he work here? Apparently, it seems that from the report anyway, that they only gave a description of a man that matched what Paine looked like, and asked him to check his records. Now, that seems quite incredible. Why would the FBI not give an actual name to be checked?
Yeah.
And I say in the article, either they didn't bother to investigate those properly, or they were trying to fudge on the matter and not really go into it too much because they didn't really want to know the answer. But also, how do you check work records with a description and not a name? It's just all very bizarre.
Yeah, and I mean, that job.
Then later on in the report, it just says the report simply states that Truly responded he had known within his employ within the past 10 years, so this would be 54 to 64, meeting the following description, and the description I gave before of Michael Paine. Then they don't say nobody of that name.
Right.
But then the really interesting, where it gets really strange with this story, is that the report then also goes on to say that Truly said that the only possibility that the Texas School Book Depository may have employed an individual meeting this description would have been 10 or 15 years ago, and would have been summer employment. And I say, well, should the FBI at this point not have actually asked if anyone by the name of Michael Paine had ever worked for the company? But it seems that they didn't, or if they did, they didn't put it in the report. Again, it's very, very weird. And And I think it was like the same thing when they went to interview the manager, Nancy Crowe, the other book depository. Nobody of that description had worked. It was the Lone Star School Book Depository had worked for the company in the past 6 years.
Yeah, why wouldn't they give them a name? I mean, it'd be so much easier to find work records, tax records, paycheck records for a name than just some random description, you know? I mean, that makes no sense whatsoever.
But where it gets strange is what I actually did. I kind of wanted to dig a little bit into this. And what I actually found was there are records of Michael Paine's employment history that are in the Warren Commission. Can't remember the exact number, but he was in the queue afterwards. And it really went out, like, this could be a coincidence, but I checked from the information available Michael Paine's work history, just on the off chance to see if the period of time that truly said, oh, somebody of that description might have worked for the book depository matched up. And actually, you know, it does. There are two gaps of time that fit. When there are two gaps of time in Michael Paine's employment history when there's a gap between he either left college, between leaving college and starting a job, or I think the other one was when he left the army. And it's very odd because those gaps in time do fit with the 10 to 15 year period. That could just be a coincidence because I do not have any other proof, but I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely odd. I mean, because you think a job like that with, basically minimum wage job, a menial job, a very labor-intensive job, would have a high turnover rate, especially over the span of 15 or 20 years. I just don't see how somebody could remember, somebody that might have worked there 15 or 20, 10 or 15 years before, without a name, it just makes no sense.
Exactly. This is what I found very, very strange. And the more I looked into these reports, the more I thought this just does not add up. There's something odd here. But more on Michael Paine. There's some more FBI documents about him. And again, it doesn't add up because there's a couple that Michael Paine took Oswald to a meeting of the American Liberties Union, which was at Southern Methodist University in October '63. But then in his Warren Commission testimony, Paine also said that he had attended a meeting of the John Birch Society. So in November of '63 now, we couldn't get two organisations more different. And it doesn't make sense as to why he would be attending both of these. But he was actually questioned as to why he did attend the meeting, and he said that, well, it wasn't because I was in sympathy with their beliefs, but I just wanted to better understand their reasoning. Again, it just seems very odd that Michael Paine, who was a member of the ACLU, but that he would at the same time be attending a meeting of the John Birch Society, and also him and Ruth would be mixing with the wealthy right-wing Russian community of Dallas and people such as Warren Shelf. So, again, discrepancies that just don't make sense unless you're looking at it from the angle that we are and the researchers are, then it does make sense.
Right, and we're talking about like the handoff, I guess, from Des Moines Shield to the Paines. And I always thought it was odd, just the whole setup that I guess that the Paines had, where they weren't together at the time yet. Michael seemed to be making enough to, let Ruth live on her own pretty much without working and pay for a house and kids, but they seem to get along just fine. Like, there's no reason for their sudden breakup.
Very convenient separation.
Yeah, I mean, there's no apparent reason for it other than the fact to accommodate Ruth taking in Marina. I mean,
Exactly.
When
it seems to just a bit too convenient and too coincidental for my liking.
Yeah, and when you look at it,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say when you look at it from the perspective that that Ruth is kind of indirectly responsible for Oswald getting his job at the depository. She's directly responsible for Oswald having to come home on Thursday, because she didn't want him there over the weekend because it was her kid's birthday. So she said, if you're going to come on Thursday, not Friday.
Exactly. When you look into it, she's really right at the centre of everything. And the other thing that always strikes me about Ruth Paine, when you really think about it, where did all the incriminating evidence against Oswald come from?
Yeah.
Her garage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was reading it.
She's not just the innocent housewife that she likes to make out. Interestingly, 2 years ago, I was in Dallas with a group of British researchers, and we went to actually see the Paine house because it literally just opened. I think it was the week before, and they allowed us to go and have a look round, and it was before like I got to see it, because we explained, we were only there for a few days, and they were very nice, they were very accommodating, but it was very much the official history, and we had a guide that took us around. It was charming, but it was very much spewing the official line. And from what he said, Ruth Paine sort of came out of retirement, I like to say, came out of spook retirement to actually help them with the reconstruction of the house inside, what it looked like at the time, because it's exactly how it was. And I think they even have some of the furniture that is perhaps not the original, but the replica. But it looks exactly how it would have looked, and it's quite weird because as you're going around, you've got all the photos of her in the kitchen and her in the room there, and Marguerite in the kitchen, the children, and it's quite creepy. But it's very much, Ruth Paine was this patriotic housewife who trying to help Marina and all this kind of thing.
Yeah, and I can't remember where I read it, if it was in Dee Genio's book or if it was in Joan Mellon's book. But there was a story about, of course, this is after the assassination, but I think she was down in Central America, I don't know, doing what, like kind of Peace Corps type stuff or whatever down there. And that just about everyone knew that she was CIA and didn't want to have anything to do with her, didn't want to talk to her.
I remember, I've read this story, yeah, it had been doing it.
Yeah, like they were very leery of her, and I guess for somebody had a good reason, like they had found something out about her, or things were getting out because of her. But yeah, I mean, it's just, and another thing, she does she does what I like to call the Buell Frazier, where she doesn't really talk to researchers.
That's right.
She might come out.
I actually tried to contact her about 10 years ago. Somebody I know got another fellow researching. I don't know how they did it, but they got her email address at the time. So I didn't really ever expect to get a reply back, but I'll try. I've got one to lose, so I just wrote her a rose.
Yeah,
Paine, I guess, email. I didn't really say that I was a conspiracy person, but I just said something like I was from the UK and I was interested in her story, but I never heard back from her, so it wasn't a surprise to me.
Yeah, I think she showed up like in the mid '90s at I think it was like a Cuban like JFK conference in Florida when she was living in Florida. Yeah, I think it might have been Diogenio telling a story that it was back, when all these, I think it was Escalante was coming out with all the Cuban files on, from the assassination, and they had this get together in Florida, to kind of talk about it all and present it all, and it was.
Oh, she was at that conference, was she?
Yeah, she kind of showed up. It wasn't like a public thing. Like it was only like a, you had to know somebody, to kind of get in there. But, she just kind of showed up and everybody was like, what the hell is she doing here? Kind of thing. And, yeah, it was just very weird. But yeah, like, she doesn't talk to researchers. She pretty much minds her own business. And, I always thought it odd too, that, everything that this woman, Ruth Paine, did for Marina and her kids, that after the assassination, Marina didn't want anything to do with this woman whatsoever.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think
So
it's because
something must have happened.
yeah, I think
Or there must be more to the story than there's officially been.
yeah, I think somebody got in Marina's ear and was like, look, this woman is nothing but trouble, and Marina might have realized that Ruth might have helped facilitate the way things turned out, But yeah, I think she showed up at James Martin, Marina's attorney at the time's house, a couple months after the assassination, and she had some belongings for Marina, and maybe I think it was some presents for the kids. And Marina didn't want to see her, and Martin pretty much told her, just leave your stuff by the door, thank you, have a good night.
Right.
Just odd behavior for somebody that supposedly it was your friend, and it was doing all this stuff to help you out, and was there when you had your baby, was giving you money and giving you a place to live, and then all of a sudden nothing.
Yeah, definitely doesn't add up. But when you look at just Ruth and Michael Paine, the whole family, on both their sides, they have families that are involved, that are connected to intelligence or have very powerful connections.
Oh yeah, we
I
can
actually was going to quote from Greg Parker's new book, the second part of Lee Harvey Oswald's Cold War, because he actually has uncovered some pretty new information, and he mentions Ruth Paine's sister. Unfortunately, I'm away on holiday at the moment, and I didn't bring my Kindle with me, so I don't have it to quote. But again, I'd urge people to read that, because that's excellent, and Greg's a really good researcher. That's available on Kindle. And he mentions her sister and her links, her probable links to intelligence, which the stuff that he's uncovered, I don't think has really been written about before. But also, when you look at Michael Paine, he had some very interesting connections, and really weirdly, he's also actually linked to the Texas School Book Depository, not only through Oswald, but his uncle. Because it was in the Harris and Livingston book, I think it's the Far Right and the Murder of John F. Kennedy, he says Michael Paine had a rich uncle, I'll just quote it now. Michael Paine had a rich uncle in Dallas, which was oil man Eric Schroeder. Across the hall from Schroeder's office in the First National Bank building was the office of J. Harvey Lewis, who was Roscoe White's attorney. And Livingston then says almost all the powerful Dallas oilmen of this period had a lawyer or two in an office adjacent to theirs. And the presence of Harvey Lewis across the hall makes it likely that Lewis was doing a significant amount of legal work for Schroeder. Schroeder, now deceased, had major connections to the Wynn Murchisons. The Dallas City Directory entries for 1939 to 1946 show this clearly. Schroeder's company was sold to the Wynns. Schroeder's boss was John Lucy, who was a major business associate of D. Harold Bird, the owner of the Texas School Book Depository. So it's kind of like you come full circle back to that.
Unbelievable. And of course, D.H. Bird was the creator of the Civilian Air Patrol, which
That's
Oswald was a part of in New Orleans. So there you go.
Everything just fits and links together. It is quite amazing. I always find that everything seems to link back to everybody else at some point. It's kind of like that 6 degrees of separation sort of meme that goes around, but you do really find that with the assassination.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, that Ruth was kind of taking care of Marina, keeping an eye on her, because it would make sense. Because at the time, the FBI was really interested in defectors or travelers to Russia that were bringing home these Russian wives. And,
that's right, yeah.
It would stand to good reason that they would want, at the height of the Cold War, to keep an eye on these Russians that come back with the defectors that, they're married very quickly. Her uncle's the head of the
Absolutely, especially when, you consider, which is the other major thing, that for anyone that thinks the official story is correct, just a few things would make alarm bells go off in your head. Just the fact that, if you think about it, at the height of the Cold War, that Oswald, who had supposedly defected, was just allowed back into the country with a Russian wife, and he wasn't arrested when he showed up in the US. He wasn't questioned. Nobody met him and said, well, what were you doing?
Yeah.
Nothing. He was just allowed to come back in. Now, this is at a time when you have to remember people who were even suspected of knowing somebody who might be a communist, people were being blacklisted in Hollywood, and people were targeted. Let alone somebody who supposedly defected and gave away secrets was just then allowed to come back into the US with a Russian wife. That doesn't set off a major alarm bell in your head, then, really.
Yeah, and I think that's what Hosty was mainly checking on. I don't think he was really interested in Oswald per se. I think he was more interested in what Marina was doing.
And also, you have to remember that, I'm sure you know that Marina's uncle was in Russian intelligence, so, and I know there are people who believe that she may have had some intelligence wrong. I'm not quite sure about that myself, but...
Well, I mean, it would make sense, because, I mean, it kind of makes sense from looking at it, like, because she was, I think she was trying to get with Robert Webster first, who was another American defector.
That's right, yeah.
And then, of course, she gets close to Lee Oswald, and it would make sense that the Russians would want somebody close to him to keep an eye on him, to get to know him. It makes sense. And it makes sense that the Americans would be interested in Marina when she gets back, and to have somebody kind of get close to her, like Ruth Paine, and kind of figure out what's going on there. Because it's not out of the realm of possibility that Marina could have been some secret super agent and, came over here to, do God knows what. But, I think it wasn't, I just don't see it as something sinister. Actually, I don't see it as something more sinister than, her kind of keeping an eye on Oswald while he was in Russia, and they just happened to, hit it off. Maybe they fell in love, or she just got pregnant and couldn't get out of it, or whatever. Who knows? But
yeah. No, I tend to agree with you on that. Yeah, I don't think there's any. Even if she did, I don't think there's anything particularly.
Yeah, because I mean, after they moved back here,
as regards the assassination, I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, after they moved back here, it wasn't like they set up a house with a white picket fence and had this great family life, and they were kind of going in two different directions, and it doesn't seem to me like they were in love, and despite the fact that they just had a baby a month before the assassination. So yeah, I mean it maybe Oswald got hip to the fact that he kind of knew what she was doing. Maybe they told him, hey, look, they're going to try to get somebody close to you. Just roll with it, and do your thing, and get out of there. And it's something we'll never know unless Marina comes clean.
And I don't think she will really say much more now. I don't think. I know people who have tried to contact her that have actually known her somewhat in the past, and have tried to contact her again, but I don't think they've really got anywhere, which I can understand, because...
But yeah, just to get back to the Paines for a second, I think I was talking about, Ruth, and it seems like Michael, was kind of trying to be buddy with Oswald, and like I said, like you were saying, taking him to some of these meetings and some of these rallies and things of that nature, and because they were kind of, if what Michael Paine was doing at Baylor was anything like what Lee Oswald was doing at Tulane, it stands to reason that these guys would have something in common, and I cannot get over how much these guys kind of look alike. You know what I mean?
That is another very Interesting point.
That's
yeah.
very wild.
The other interesting thing is that linking Oswald to Michael Paine is that when after Oswald's arrest and his address book was found by the Dallas police, there's a really weird notation in there. Well, there's a few, but one of them, it said it had written in it SMU Hillcrest. Now, Southern Methodist University is often referred to as SMU, and Hillcrest, well, that's very interesting because Hillcrest, there's a Hillcrest Boulevard which was directly across from the campus, and the SMU website, I looked it up, states that the university is bounded by Hillcrest Avenue to the west. Now, this cafeteria where Michael Paine met the students and often ate was also near Hillcrest, so that's very interesting. And another thing, Oswald's former landlady, which was Mrs. Bertha Cheek, which is Erlene Roberts' sister, she lived at 5901 Hillcrest. And during her Warren Commission testimony, she said that she had actually rented rooms to a number of SMU students. And she also said that she knew Jack Ruby.
Oh, yeah.
So it's very odd. And actually underneath that notation in Oswald's address book, there's on the second line, there's the word bank written. And that could perhaps be some reference to one of the meetings that was held by the bank. I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is I think it's an FBI report that's in one of the 26 volumes. And it mentions one of the Cuban exile group meetings. It was the DRE, which was the Cuban Student Directorate. And that's the one that Oswald is reported to have attended, and that was held by the bank. So I just wonder if that's perhaps some sort of reference to that.
Yeah, I mean, what it sounds like to me is, if Michael Paine was doing this stuff as early as April, then he was probably doing it before this too. And, you don't have Oswald doing it until he actually gets to New Orleans in the summer. And doing it, probably either on his own or for Guy Bannister. From what I've heard and the research I've seen, it seems to me like Guy Bannister was doing this kind of stuff. But these right wingers, they had a lot of ties between Texas and New Orleans, or Dallas and New Orleans and Florida and California. There's like a right wing nexus that kind of curves through the South there, where a lot of these people knew each other, and a lot of these people traveled a lot and to each other's states and attended these rallies and meetings, and of course their agendas fit hand in hand with these anti-Castro Cubans, and it all kind of makes sense. So maybe Oswald was influenced by what Michael Paine was doing and kind of wanted to do the same thing in New Orleans.
Another interesting thing about New Orleans is that Bruce Paine, I think this was September I might have the date slightly wrong, September the 8th maybe. It was kind of early to September at least. But Bruce Paine actually drove Marina to New Orleans when Oswald was there. And I just find it very interesting because I think she says she was there. This is something I think she mentions in her testimony. She says she was there like a weekend or something. But you don't know what she actually did. Now I'm very interested in what she did because I wonder now. This is purely my speculation, but I do wonder if she was actually doing what she was doing that weekend. She says something like she was helping them settle in. I just wonder what exactly she really was doing, and whether, like you said, she had any links to people like Bannister, and perhaps whether she would have. It's impossible to know, and this is just me kind of thinking aloud, but whether she would have met up with any of those kind of people, I don't know. It's just interesting.
Yeah, well, she was there for 3 weeks at the beginning when she initially drove them to New Orleans, or drove Marina to New Orleans to help her, get settled and set up. I think she was there for 3 weeks.
Was it 3 weeks?
I think so. Which would that's a lot.
I just wonder what would she be doing for all that time? It just seems that the whole settling in thing is again very, very convenient because it's at a very significant time when you're looking at the timeline, and yeah, it's just shortly before he really comes back to Dallas, and I wonder if she had anything to do with that personally.
It's quite possible. I mean, it's, you know, it just all seems so a little too convenient. You know, just the timing of everything, the scenario of you know, him getting a job, and you know, just everything. And I'll tell you something interesting, Francesca, that I read earlier today that I hadn't really thought of before, is that possibly, of course, you know, Oswald was you know, creating this A.J. Heidel alias, okay, that was tied to the Fair Play for Cuba committee that had ordered this gun and this rifle, and you know, the A.J. Heidel alias, and you know, just about everything found at his rooming house was, you know, tied to, or could be tied to, A.J. Heidel and not Lee Oswald. All his Oswald stuff was at the Paine's house. And somebody was theorizing earlier that maybe, you know, Oswald was, you know, kind of creating this alternate persona for the purpose of, you know, pinning the assassination on this phantom person, you know, Alec Heidel, and you know, creating his own little legend for Alec Heidel, you know, you know, ordering the rifles and staying at these places and being this pro Castro guy, and who knows? I don't know. I'm just rambling, but I just thought it was interesting, something I hadn't really thought of before.
That is an interesting view. I admit I hadn't thought of it from that angle before, but I guess it's entirely possible.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought it interesting. I'd throw it out there, and because I hadn't really thought about it like that before. Well, this guy on Facebook sent me a paper that he had written where he kind of theorized that was what was going on. And it was Tommy. I don't want to murder his name. It starts with a D in the book group, but you know, who knows? But I'm sure it's been theorized by other people in the past. You know, I think people have been through damn near every scenario possible when trying to figure this thing out in the past 52 years.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing with the Paines is that they are hugely significant, and they still are, because their tax returns are still classified. That could actually be also because they're still alive, because I think there's some sort of rule that if somebody's still alive, that they can't release them. That's what I read when I originally looked into it. But then again, you have people who are dead, like Oswald, and you know, other records from people that have long been dead and they're still not released. So I don't think that when they do eventually die, that they will be released either. I looked up some of their records in the search engine of the archives, you know, the JFK database, and I think from about the early 50s, sort of right through the kind of assassination period, all their tax records are classified. So.
Well, I'm sure Ruth could release them on her own if she so desired, but
right.
And I think
I doubt that's going to happen.
Yeah, me either. And Marina, since she was his wife at the time, she actually controls Oswald's tax records, and I think it was Mary LaFontaine got permission to get them in the 90s from Marina, but the only one that can get them is Marina. You know, she just can't send a note like to the teacher and say, yes, Mary can.
It has to be your next kin or close relative that has to request them, yeah. Right.
So, I mean, these people could definitely clear this stuff up if they wanted to, but, you know, I don't see it happening anytime soon. But yeah, so, you know, the Paines, just like Buell Frazier, just like, a couple other people related to this case, they seem to want to be looked at as innocent bystanders that just something horrible just happened to, they just happen to be touched by this horrible history, That's, at least that's the way it comes off to me, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it could have been anybody,
That's the position that, Reese Paine very much likes to project if you go and visit the house, which is now owned as a museum by the city of Birmingham. That's definitely the case. But I actually do wonder, though, whether, for example, that the Dallas police and perhaps the FBI actually had some, perhaps had some suspicions about the Paines, because I don't know if you know this, but there are actually Dallas police documents from the criminal intelligence section which show that Paines were actually under surveillance, and this is after the assassination for a few years. So as late as 1966, there are documents that report, who was visiting the house, if a strange car was seen outside the house, and also when they moved, where they moved to now. It's quite odd, because why, as late 65, 66, would the Dallas police be interested in still keeping an eye on the Paines, unless perhaps were they suspicious about them?
Probably so. I mean, plus, Garrison was starting his thing in New Orleans, and I know she ended up having to testify, or at that trial. It's just, if we're wrong.
They are obviously significant, because to the extent that they were monitoring them, that they had them under surveillance, so there must be a reason.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing stinks from top to bottom, and you never know. I mean, if she ever Googles herself, she could,
I wonder if she has.
She could possibly hear this someday, or somebody could direct it her way, and all I gotta say is, if Ruth Paine ever hears this, that she could clear a lot of this up. If she.
It would be fantastic if she was to just talk, but again, I really doubt that's gonna happen.
Yeah, but at a certain point,
she's never gonna say what we want her to say. I mean, which is like the truth, but.
Well, you never know. I mean, there's always that possibility, because it seems like the people closest to Oswald at the time are still alive. You got Buell Frazier, Marina, Ruth Paine. These people are still alive, and I guess relatively young. Because they were young at the time. They were 19, 20 years old at the time. I think they're
still quite young.
Yeah, it's. It's always possible. So, Ruth, if you ever hear this and you want to clear things up, shoot me an email at thelonegunmanpodcast@gmail.com, and we'd be happy to talk to you.
That would be headline breaking news. You'd have to post everywhere. I won't hold my breath on that.
Yeah, I won't either. But hey, you never know. I like to think that maybe someday somebody that I do these shows about will hear them and be like, what's this guy talking about? I gotta set him straight.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
That would be great.
Yeah. But is there anything about the Paines we didn't get to?
Just trying to think. That's it. Yeah. It's covered everything.
Yeah. So I mean, were they just innocent bystanders in history, or was were they I guess glorious babysitters? That kind of steered.
Well, what I would say to anybody listening who isn't sure is, don't believe us. Do your own research, because I think when you do your own research, which is what you should always do, that they say, trust but verify. You should never believe anybody unless you've been able to look it up for yourself. But I think once you do, you realise that the official story regarding the Paines just does not add up.
Yeah, well said. And when you apply a little logic and reasoning to not just one small incident, but that whole span of time, that 9 months of time that the Paines were around the Oswalds, and look at everything, from beginning to end. It doesn't sit right with me, and just from everything I've read and the documents, yeah. I mean, that's where I stand on it, and I know you feel the same way. But everybody, like she said, everybody out there, just do your own research and then see where you stand, and just check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Good advice. For life generally, I think, as well.
Yeah, not just this aspect, but all of it. And that's why we're still here, All right, well, thank you, Francesca, so much for joining me, and hopefully this sounds a hell of a lot better than the last one we did. We've been trying to put this together for a couple months here to get it back on track. Well, we finally made it happen today, and I thank you so much for joining me from lovely Italy.
You're welcome. It's been great to talk to you again. So I hope to do it again soon.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, man, this year's almost done. I can't believe it. Whew.
It's flown, hasn't it?
It has. It's true what they say. That the older you get, the faster time flies, and that's the truth.
Yeah, I'm finding that out as well.
Yeah, I feel you. All right, Francesca. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I will talk to you soon. Head over to tlgpodcast.com, and I will put up a link to Francesca's wonderful article, 3 Men in a Book Depository, so you can read it for yourself and check it out. It's always good to read it because there's much more detail than we could talk about here, and references and other things. And but anyway, just stay tuned, and I'll be back next week. And thank you, Francesca, for joining me from your holiday.
You're welcome.
No problem. And people, the sumbitch is in a can, beam up the satellite down directly to your ears. This is your boy. Peace.
Change and remain. Growing pains.
Podcast.